Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for being here late on the last day of the conference. Nice to see that still a bunch of people showed up. My name is Jart van Ingen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called GetFocus. And basically, what we've built is an AI system to help senior R&D leaders, typically execs, to help figure out what are all the emerging technologies in their space and how fast are they actually getting better such that we can see market shifts coming before it's obvious. And today I would like to first take you back a little bit and explain how and why that works, and then tell you what it reveals about the future of batteries, in particular for EVs, and in particular regarding the question of whether sodium ion is a real threat to LFP or not. So here's a snapshot of some of the organizations that we work with. Like I mentioned, typically we'd work with whoever's in charge of R&D and allocating capital behind backing this or that technology bet. And we do so across industries, but increasingly in the automotive sector. And the reason we exist is because anyone that's dealing with having to allocate capital towards this or that or the other technology is facing the same problem, namely that there's exponentially more emerging technologies over time. So if you think it's bad now, it's going to get exponentially worse. And to solve this problem, what we've built is an objective system that can serve as your technology disruption radar. So back in 2018, I was at the AI department of Volvo cars. And I was asked to figure out whether we could move from making technology bets based on expert opinion and based on gut feel towards something more objective. And then I found out that there's a research group at MIT that has actually been studying this problem for about 30 years. And they found an interesting solution to it, but that solution would never ever scale before we got AI. So what these folks at MIT did is basically, for the first time ever, empirically measure how quickly technologies actually get better with time. So they wrote an entire PhD thesis about how you do that, but essentially what you measure is how does a technology perform in a given year based on all the devices in that technology category that were on the market, and what did that technology cost. And they did that in 28 domains of technology, and I'll show you a couple examples because it reveals some interesting things. First, if we take a look at the hard drive industry, every dot that you see here on this graph is a hard drive that was on the market in a certain year. And on the y-axis, you can see how many dollars you would have to pay per gigabyte of storage. Now, note that that y-axis is logarithmic. So what looks like linear progress is actually exponential progress. And also note that the rate of improvement for how much more gigabytes of storage you would get per dollar or how many less dollars you would have to pay per gigabyte of storage is very consistent over time, in this case averaging at about 32% year over year. Same thing we see for solar panels. But at a much lower rate, in this case about 8.5% per year. Same thing for computer memory, but much faster. Same thing for genome sequencing, consistent exponential progress at a very consistent rate. Same thing for hematology. So basically what MIT found is that all technologies improve exponentially, and they all improve at relatively consistent rates. So in other words, not just semiconductors have a Moore's law, but every field of technology has its own Moore's law. And here you can see a summary of all the technologies and the rate of improvement that they measured. So think of the rate of improvement as an interest rate. It compounds with time, and the same as with a savings account, right? If you have an emerging early stage technology, it's going to perform relatively poorly. It's going to have all sorts of problems. It's going to be way too expensive for what you intend to use it for. But then, because you get a percentage-wise improvement that stays consistent, in absolute steps, you get bigger improvements. And that's why we think of technology evolving as disrupting, because the bigger the steps get, all of a sudden it looks like it comes out of nowhere. But the thing that is consistent, or relatively consistent, is the percentage with which it gets better. So if we can estimate this percentage, we can actually tell which technologies are going to be the real deal and which ones are not. But there's also problems. So you can imagine, if you want to empirically measure this, right, all of these dots, you have to go into the history books, you have to figure it out. Well, that takes an enormous amount of time. We have a whole team of people that do nothing but that all day, every day. But there's another issue, which is that you can only do it when it has already happened. And we're in the business of being early because we help support R&D leaders. So we need an approach that can forecast this rather than measure it empirically. And that's when we started thinking about patent data for three simple reasons. First of all, before a technology is on the market, typically it's patented. The only thing, personally, that I find funny about patents, because generally they're quite boring and very dry to read, is that it's literally the only thing that we actually agree on globally. So in the late 1800s, all of the world economies that mattered convened in Paris for the Paris Convention, and we globally standardized how patents work, meaning that a patent here in Germany looks virtually the same as one in the Netherlands, the United States, Japan, China, Korea, doesn't matter. It all follows the same rules, it all has the same structure, and it all works roughly the same way, which makes it perfect for us. Because that means that we have a highly standardized system that tracks virtually all technological progress. And it turns out that there are two key metrics that live in patent citation networks. So patents cite each other just like scientific literature, but with a few differences. Namely that with scientific literature, it's up to whoever's writing the paper to determine who they're going to cite, whereas with patents, the examiners do over half of the citing. So you have an extra check built into the system to make sure that all relevant, as it's called, prior art is being referred to. And once you have all the patents that belong to a particular area of emerging or established technology, and we know all the citations that are happening, there's two things that we calculate. The first we call cycle time, which looks at when we get a new generation of patents in a certain year, how far back in time do they cite to the prior state of technology. So what this gives us is a gap in years, and that gap you can think of as how long did it take to come up with the next step for this field of technology. So the next thing we look at is once you get that next step, how much does the technology get cited by subsequent steps? And this tells you something about the magnitude of the step forward. So how quick are the steps? How big are the steps? Very simple. So then, with the MIT data, we were able to prove that technologies that we empirically measured to have a very high rate of improvement also have very short cycle times, and they have high knowledge flow, meaning that they iterate quickly, and when they iterate, they make meaningful iterations because those new publications tend to get cited a lot. So at the top, you can see optical telecommunication, which in MIT's data set had the highest rate of improvement. Typically, patents that get published in that space will cite back 3-4 years maybe, and then when they get published, they get cited a whole bunch of times. Whereas at the bottom of the list, you find milling machines. And if there's any new patents on milling machines at all, they tend to cite back 30, 40, 50, 60 years in time. And those publications hardly ever get cited, and everything in between. So basically what we are able to do with these metrics, with the MIT data, and we've measured hundreds of additional technologies since, is we've been able to build a model that once we have all of the patents and we can measure these two metrics in citation data, we can calculate with an R² of 0.7 what the rate of improvement of any technology is going to be. So then we figured, cool, interesting science project so far. Let's see if we could have actually predicted any disruptions with this. Because the beautiful thing with patent data is that it's all dated, so we can limit ourselves to a snapshot of patent data from the past and see whether the improvement rates would have told us that a technology that we now know has disrupted, whether that also showed up as a faster improving technology. So I'll show you a few cases, and then I promise we'll move on to batteries. So first case is online versus offline payment. So nowadays we pay everything online, but it wasn't always like that. And the numbers are a bit small, but basically you can see here this blue line and you have the black line. The black line is for offline payment, the blue line is for online payment. And in the mid-90s, the first ever online payment patents started to emerge. By 96, we would have told you that online payment technology was improving much faster than offline payment technology. And a few years later, only PayPal got founded, the first ever online payment company. Then we have hard disk drives versus solid state drives. So for ever since the early 2000s, solid state drives have been improving faster than hard disk drives, but they've always been way too expensive. This rate of improvement would have told you that solid state drives were going to get better and cheaper a lot faster than hard disk drives. And now, since the late 2010s, you saw the first ever market disruption of hard disk drives by solid state drives. But again, this would have told you years in advance that it was going to come. So what does any of this have to do with batteries? So basically what we've done is with our system, we've scouted every single emerging battery chemistry that could conceivably play a role in the automotive market before 2030. And we're looking to answer the question whether sodium ion is the next LFP through an improvement rate analysis. So first of all, let me show you that we already, with the improvement rates, could have predicted that LFP would win, or at least dominate over NMC, as we're seeing now in the market. And that market shift started happening in the late 2010s, early 2020s. But again, here you can see the blue line, which is LFP, and you have the orange line, which is NMC, that the gap in the improvement rates has persisted for a long time, since the early 2010s already. So about 10 years before you saw the disruption on the market, this would have shown you that, hey, the momentum is shifting towards LFP rather than NMC. Then, now we're comparing sodium ion to LFP. So since 2023, sodium ion battery technology has had a higher rate of improvement than LFP. So what that tells me is that despite the fact that currently sodium ion is still more expensive, generally speaking, or at least for automotive applications, and on other performance metrics also it can't quite compete, right? The energy density is not quite there. There's a bunch of other issues that the field is working on. But in terms of the rate of improvement, it has already surpassed LFP, and by quite a lot. So that's an early indication that indeed the momentum will shift towards sodium ion. Now, to give you a little bit more detail about how this actually works, because we've looked for this study not just at sodium ion in general, but we've split it apart into cathode, anode, electrolyte, fuel cell platforms. We've looked at manufacturing techniques. We've looked at a bunch of stuff. The way that we do that is in the following way. So it starts with a question, right? Which chemistry will dominate? We scout every single emerging technology using our AI agents that screen hundreds of thousands, if not millions of patents to look at what technology clusters actually exist that people are working on. For each, we create a separate patent landscape. We calculate the cycle time, we calculate the knowledge flow, we look at TRLs, we estimate the improvement rate. We turn that into what we call a decision-making matrix, where we prioritize technologies that are mature and fast improving, because those are the ones that you have to act on right now, and deprioritize the ones that are not improving fast. There's loads of early stage technologies that people hype up, but according to our analysis aren't worth any attention and you should probably just ignore. And then finally, what we can do is we can, using, again, AI agents, since we have all of the patents anyways, we can keep reading them on a continual basis and update you each month on what progress is being made, what your competitors are up to, etc. Right, so first of all, if we look at anodes. So here's a bunch of NMC anodes, LFP anodes, sodium ion anodes, and also anode technologies for solid state batteries. 3 out of 4 sodium ion anode technologies are the fastest improving among all of the various anode technologies that we've looked at. On the cathode side, the difference is even more extreme. And in particular, the P2 type anodes with later oxides for sodium ion is, according to our analysis, the fastest improving. But whichever cathode type you pick for sodium ion, all of them are improving faster than any of the other contenders out there. And then full cell platforms, again, you see sodium ion at the very top of the list. So far, looks like sodium ion will disrupt LFP, and we think it'll happen faster than most people realize. But there are some differences between what is happening now and what happened to NMC as compared, when it was battling it out with LFP, which is that NMC was kind of overspecified and fairly expensive. And today LFP is cheap, safe, durable, scaled, etc. And sodium ion is still more expensive than LFP is today. But if we look back, the same thing applied in the early days, comparing NMC to LFP. And what the improvement rate difference tells us is that we think it will move in the direction of sodium ion. What we cannot exactly predict is how much time that will take. So a couple things to do today. If you're not already piloting sodium ion batteries, and this especially counts for car OEMs, you should pilot them. And also you have to aggressively, we think, build out your supplier options, and a key bottleneck there is going to be hard carbon anodes. So if you don't have any options there yet, it's time to start aggressively looking for supply, because those that have supply will outcompete those that don't. And then what not to do. So like with LFP in the beginning, it was, it got dismissed a little bit, especially in the Western world, as a China-only chemistry, and we're still working on trying to close that gap today. And in fact, there are some Western automotives that still haven't launched nor announced LFP models for their fleets. And also, what you shouldn't do is wait for the cost gap to close, because as soon as the cost gap has closed, it's going to be super obvious to everyone that it's indeed moving in that direction. What the improvement rate tells you is that it will move in that direction, and that if you act now, you're still early. So our final conclusion is that the beginnings of the disruption before 2030 are going to be obvious. That if you're not already, you should pilot now, and you should set triggers. That's also something we can do in our system, right? If you're not convinced yet, you need to see some specific evidence. We can continuously monitor for that evidence and flag it for you when that time has come. And then finally, and I'll open it up for discussion, the full report is available on our website, www.getfocus.eu. You don't have to leave your details. You can just go and read it. You can download it. If you'd like to continue the discussion, or if you'd like to connect with me, you can scan the QR code, and I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you very much.